So welcome and thank you for joining Brad Nickason and myself for our fourth online We've Got Issues interview. We've Got Issues is a nonpartisan, citizens-based forum where we start conversations about issues of concern to Tri-Cities residents. We also serve as a way to keep residents connected to their elected representatives. So we'd like to acknowledge Tri-Cities Community Television for filming these interviews. It's a way to keep us well connected with our elected representatives, especially in these times of COVID, and also given the fact that we no longer have a community television station to play that role. So I'd like to acknowledge that we are interviewing today on site in Port Coquitlam, and we are on unceded Coast Salish territories. And joining us today is Member of Parliament Ron McKinnon. And Ron is the Member of Parliament for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, and he's in his second term representing his constituents. So we acknowledge that Ron does have a lot of other roles that he plays as Member of Parliament, but today, in this interview, we'd like to focus on COVID-19. We're going to ask Ron to talk a little bit about the government's role in COVID-19 and the role that he plays as well. We're also going to talk a little bit about respectful workplace. It's a theme that's common to all of our interviews and, of course, something that needs to be there in order for the work of government to get done. So we'd like to thank Ron for joining us today, and welcome, Ron.
Well, thank you both for being here, and Nancy and Brad. It's a great opportunity to talk to people and let everybody know what's going on. And I appreciate your involvement and your initiative in doing this.
Well, thanks, Ron. And I think maybe a good place to start today is, given that we're in the middle of a global pandemic, is if you could maybe put the whole COVID-19 situation into a little bit of context for us. Where does Canada stand in relation to the rest of the world? And maybe where do we stand in your constituency in relation to the rest of Canada when it comes to COVID-19?
Well, that's a pretty big question. I think Canada is doing very well. This pandemic is something we've certainly been taking very seriously. We are, of course, we're in the throes of this surge of a second wave, and it's really important at this time that people get back to basics about how to survive, how to thrive through the pandemic, which is social isolation or social distancing to whenever they can. The best protection against infection is a 6-foot distance, and when you can't maintain the 6-foot distance, the wearing a mask is very important. Also, avoiding touching your face and so forth, and make sure you wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Those are the basics of getting through this pandemic. But we as a government are certainly involved with helping our whole country to thrive through this pandemic. We have, of course, we have, of course, the Public Health Agency of Canada, which derives from the experience of the SARS epidemic some years ago. And that whole structure of the public health agencies of Canada and the public health agencies in the provinces kind of is the foundation for things like epidemic and pandemic response. And we recognized right away that we needed to really, particularly around March when Parliament rose, we basically, the whole country became very, very embroiled in the social distancing situation. And in order for people to do that, in order for people to be able to respect the social distancing requirements and to stop the pandemic in its tracks, was the hope prevent a huge growth in the pandemic that might overwhelm our health systems, we needed to provide economic support for individuals, for people, and for companies in order that they could keep individuals employed, keep the companies kind of in position to resume once the pandemic was, essentially run its course and so forth. So that's really been our focus right from the beginning, is to help Canadians to make ends meet, to survive the through to the other side of the pandemic.
Okay, thanks, Ron. I think that gives us a really good overview of the situation. And I think you were talking about social distancing and things like that. You'll notice, of course, that none of us are wearing masks. And we just want to reiterate once again that when we came into your office, we all had our masks on. But given that Brad and I are in the same social bubble, we're not wearing masks, and we're socially distanced from you by at least 2 meters. So that's why we're able to have this conversation without wearing our masks.
That's exactly correct, and that's what we should be doing.
And also, with the way that the pandemic changes so quickly, like we get news every day on updates, how does the Government of Canada and you stay up to date? Like, how do you get the most up-to-date information?
Well, I'm able to get briefings from the health department, from the various departments within the government. We have caucus phone calls on a regular basis in which we can get further information about the different policies that are being proposed or that are unfolding. And these also give us an opportunity to feedback concerns, issues, problems to the ministers, and so that they can adapt to the circumstances. One of the things we've noticed, one of the things with the rollout of some of our supports, things like the CERB, for example, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, is it had to be rolled out really quickly so that it could have the most effect. And initially, it had a lot of gaps in it, and through feedback from our members, certainly, but feedback from members right across the House, the government was able to identify deficiencies and correct them. It's not perfect, but they went a long way to making it as good as it could be in the circumstances. But it also depended on the public servants who, in many cases, were diverted from other departments to focus on the COVID response. That's to give people information about what's going on, but also to do all the heavy lifting about making sure that people were getting the benefits and so forth. The government has also maintained a website called canada.ca/coronavirus. It's also got an alias, canada.ca.covid19, which has a comprehensive description of the government programs related to COVID-19. There's also a website called buyandsell.ca, which is a website where manufacturers, where entrepreneurs who have services they wish to offer to the government for meeting some of our COVID-19 kind of requirements can be put forward.
It's interesting. I wasn't aware of that website, but I did go on the Government of Canada COVID website, and I admit I played around that you have a tool there where you can plug in information and it'll ask you a series of questions, and then it tells you what you're eligible for. Are you eligible for CERB? Are you eligible for this or that? And then it also provides you with the next steps, what you need to do in order to get that benefit. So I found that was very helpful as well.
Well, exactly. There are those kind of services out there. There was also an app for intelligent phones, iPhones and Androids and so forth, that actually in BC, it kind of diverts you to a BC-related app as well, which gives a lot more specific information on a regional basis. And of course, there is the COVID Alert application as well, which is not fully implemented in British Columbia at this point, but the import of that is so that people can be advised if they've been in the presence for 15 minutes or more of someone who later, within the next couple of weeks, marks down that they have been, or records that they have been diagnosed positive for COVID.
Does not the app track you and tell you if you've been maybe, possibly exposed to somebody who has COVID?
Well, I think that's an important clarification. The app doesn't track anything. The app, when you install it on your phone, the phone creates a random number that it uses to identify itself to the application, to the database. There's no way of identifying that with an individual, right? And it communicates with other phones in the vicinity by Bluetooth, and it detects if they're within 6 feet for a long enough period of time, it marks their secret number down, and once a day kind of thing, it sends that information to the database. If somebody who has this app is then later
identified
as having being positive for COVID, they would be given a key, basically a token to enter that would be unique to them. They would enter that into their app, and it would go to the database, and the database would then basically be able to identify the cell phones that were in contact with that person within the last 2 weeks.
And then that information is presumably eventually just fades away.
Correct.
Right. So nothing is tracked. Nobody's kept track of.
So nobody knows who you were in contact with. Nobody knows where you were in contact. Nobody knows anything of that kind. There is not enough information so it's not a contact tracing app. It's a exposure awareness app. And the idea is that if you are informed that you have potentially been exposed to someone who has the virus, then you can call up your public health officials. You dial 811 and say, hey, I've got this thing. And they can advise you what to do to go forward. Now, it isn't fully implemented in British Columbia. It's currently implemented in Ontario. Quebec is coming on board, and New Brunswick, I think, and the other provinces in the Maritimes are also on board with it. I think Alberta is coming on board, but people can download it and use it anyway. And then when the province is able to provide these tokens, then everybody's ready to go. But even if BC isn't doing this, if you're in contact with somebody from Ontario who then later records in Ontario that they've been tested and diagnosed with the virus, the fact that you were in contact with them in the last 2 weeks would still be informed to you.
The fact your phone was in contact with their phone.
Correct.
Right.
It's
It's dependent on that little aspect, but.
And if you put your phones in the box all together with everybody else,
Without masks, that's bad.
Phones without masks is just
social distancing,
it's a big
no
problem,
mask.
right? So it's not perfect. There are certainly limitations, but it's one more aspect of how we're able to deal with the virus going forward. How we're going to help to prevent the third wave and basically keep the second wave better under control.
So forgive me. Is that implemented though? Is that actually being used in Ontario and in Quebec at this point?
Yes, it is. So the application is available to anyone from the Apple Store or from the Google Play Store. And you can download it wherever you are. It doesn't matter. So that when when it is time and all the other provinces are on board, basically all of Canada will be covered. Right now, there's about 3 million people who have downloaded and use it.
Sure. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more? Like you were talking about, that's a federally run application. Can you tell us maybe a little bit more about which level of government is responsible for giving out that kind of information or coordinating responses and requirements for COVID?
Well, this is a national database, and it's basically supported by the federal government, but it's up to the individual provinces to provide support in their provinces, and that kind of support depends on. I mean, the support we need there is for the regional health agencies, the people who are testing for the virus are able to, if you are identified positive, that they can tell you, well, here's your token, enter that into your application. that's the part that's missing, at least in British Columbia. And hopefully that will come along soon. I haven't heard that the BC government yet is committed to going that way, but we'll probably have to wait until after the election to find that out.
What would stop? What would slow down a government? Like, I mean, because that's a kind of a, seems to me, a common sense thing, and as a member of the general population, one of the things that frustrates me a lot is when common sense things just aren't pushed forward. What would stop a BC government or a Nova Scotia government from going, hey, let's get on board right away?
Well, I think you'd have to ask those governments. But I think most.
But what's your opinion? What do you think? What do you think is the reason?
Well, there may well be, that they have backlogs of work to be done. They need to put some staff on it. They need to put some resources behind it. But having said that, we as a federal government have provided, part of the restart plan, for example, is the Safe Restart Plan, is we've allocated $19 billion to all of the, across the country to help the provinces deal with a safe restart. And I believe British Columbia gets $2 billion of that.
So is there a cost to the province for using that application, specifically to the province?
Well, the ability to create this encrypted token that they can give to people, would require a bit of software to be installed, and there would have to be some sort of some degree of management around that. But it, I don't know what the impediments to that might really be in British Columbia. But I know that Quebec, which was originally not going to go ahead with it, they were going to do it their own way. They've since, in the last week or so, they've decided, yes, we're going to go along with it. And it works better if we have one application right across the country.
Coordinated response. Yeah. I guess, of course, COVID is, putting forward a lot of challenges all across the country. Can you tell us a little bit about how it's changed the way the federal government operates, just like on a day-to-day basis, and how it affects the way you do your job on a day-to-day basis?
Well, the way the government has been affected, of course, is that a great many people who work for the government, the public servants, have over the past number of months been seconded from their respective departments to be supportive of programs related to rolling out the benefits. In terms of the Parliament itself, which is not part of the government per se, we have the Parliament itself has adapted. We have basically dragged it into the 21st century. So we've taken this staid and stodgy 19th century institution and kind of propelled it to at least some degree into the 21st century. As a member of the Health Committee in the last Parliament, and going forward, I believe, we were actually the very first committee of Parliament who had an official committee meeting entirely by teleconference in all of history of Canada. And a week later, we were the very first committee to have, a totally video conference committee meeting. And from that point on, we were kind of the guinea pigs, and we learned, as the parliamentary staff learned how to make this work. A number of other committees were added to that mix. But in the course of time, through from about April on to early July, we had roughly 30 committee meetings entirely by video conference, and these were meetings of 3 hours, 4 hours, oftentimes, where we were undertaking a study on the government response to COVID-19. And so we heard testimony from a great many people, from airlines, from epidemiologists, from public health officials, and so on and so forth.
Do you think it's an effective way to govern? Like, would you like to see it continue like this, or do you think that it would go back to the way it was with meeting in person and things like that in Ottawa?
I'm of two minds of that. I mean, on the one hand, it presents a great many opportunities. We can spend more time in our ridings as MPs, and still participate fully in the Parliament. Actually, right now, after since the 23rd of September, we're actually operating a fully hybrid Parliament at this time, which means that I can be in my in my house via Zoom, participating in a debate, participating in a question period, participating in the whole functioning of the Parliament. At the same time, while there are people in the House itself, in the chamber, who are participating in the standard way. And this is necessary for us to operate during this COVID time when we don't want to be sitting close to each other. So the people in the House, there's a relatively small number of people in the House. They're very spread out. And when they're not in the House, they're wearing masks and so forth. But that means that we can't really have all 338 members of Parliament in that room, because it would be a massive super spreader event, right? So the very fact that we can now mix, having people in the House as well as having people in their houses is a very powerful thing. One of the things that made that happen, that we were, prior to this month, when we were doing things, we had committee meetings and so forth. That was okay, but we couldn't have a fully hybrid Parliament because of voting. So we have adopted, as a House, we've adopted a voting method that is somewhat cumbersome, but it allows the validation of the vote, the person who is voting to be authenticated, because you have to be on screen or you have to be in the House, right? But it's very time consuming. So the very first vote we took in that way, the typical vote of that nature would normally take about 7 minutes. This one took over an hour. So I think the last time we did this was, I think we got it down to about half an hour. But it's still a much more cumbersome mechanism. I understand that there is a project afoot within the parliamentary resources. The parliamentary staff are working on an app that would make it a lot easier.
How do you think that these changes, or this new way of doing business, so to speak, how does that affect transparency and sort of the ability of your constituents to engage and to be involved in the whole process there?
I think it's a non-issue. For example, I can with Zoom, with video conferencing, I can participate with, I can have meetings with my constituents as I have been doing over the last 6 or 7 months. It makes it easier for them to attend those meetings. And I can have those meetings no matter where they are, no matter where I am. But it also facilitates having ministers participate in events in the riding. We've had a number of ministers participate. We've had a couple of ministers do town halls with the Chamber of Commerce. We did a town hall with the fisheries, the Water Watch people, about a month ago, with the Minister for Fisheries and Oceans. We did a meeting with Minister Lametti just this week, with members from that were concerned with restorative justice, and it makes it very easy for ministers to participate in those kinds of events, because they don't have to spend a whole day getting to Vancouver and then spend an hour or 2 hours getting to where they have to be, go all the things that one has to do before the meeting starts and after the meeting, and right. So they can, if they have an hour in their schedule, we can kind of book a slot and say, come along and talk to us. And I think it's a very powerful thing for democracy.
I'm not sure if this is the right time to interject this particular question, but something that you said is really interesting to me. I agree with you. That's a really powerful tool. I actually sat in on one of your I guess a town hall maybe with Catherine McKenna, I think it was, okay, on an environmental issue, on an environmental thing, and I thought that was awesome. It was an awesome thing to do, because it gave me a chance at home to participate in something where the minister, wherever she was, came in and you were there too. I thought that was terrific, and I think that that's awesome. But one of the things that I'm a little bit worried about is how when you're doing things over, say, Zoom, and that's the way you've built your model in Parliament. I'm a little worried about what other people in the day-to-day, within the Tri-Cities, what they have to do, what essential workers have to do. There's a little bit of a discrepancy in what happens, and for me, it's really a leadership thing. I think for you guys to say, hey, we understand that you have to go back to work, and we do too. It's one thing to ask, it's one thing to shield yourself from risk. Well, and I'm being selfish here. My wife is a school teacher, and she's in one of those super spreader events every single day. You know, I understand that they're different. We're looking at kids a different way, but I assure you, the stress that teachers are going through this every single day is off the charts. So how do we? And this is not by any means me like, Ron, you guys have got to do more for all of us people. But how do you square that? And what do you think about that situation that other people have? There seems to be an inequity thing here.
Well, I think different jobs have different requirements. There are jobs that have to have a physical presence, and there are other jobs that don't. And having meetings with Zoom also has, it doesn't fully replace in-person meetings either. They both have their place. For example, if I'm in a meeting at Zoom in Zoom, I can talk to people in the meeting. So it's kind of, we have one channel of communication there. But what you miss there is the side conversations. When you go to the back of the room and you're filling up your coffee cup, you can talk to the opposition and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or hey, what about that? So you kind of miss those kinds of conversations. Also, in the periphery of things that happen in the House, when you're in the lobby, you can talk to ministers directly. You can sit down and say, listen, what's going on, in a much less formal way. And certainly it applies to members of the opposition as well. They will often walk across and sit down next to a minister and have a conversation in the House. It's much harder to do with Zoom. Having said that, there are many, many, many jobs where Zoom works great. But it's not going to replace every job, right? But I think it's also an opportunity to change the way we work. So you mentioned about this is all very good, but we got to go back to work. Well, I'm continuing to work this way. There are many jobs where we can continue to work with tools like this, and I think it has important ramifications throughout our society. I think that instead of moving people to the data, we can move the data to the people. So if you look at broadly in our society, if you look at you look at how many people drive downtown into Vancouver every day. What is it, 100,000 cars? So in the morning, 100,000 cars go there. Another 100,000 pours out of town, going everywhere. And end of the day, they all kind of reverse. So the city sort of breathes, commuters. Most of those people, not all those people, but most of those people are working at data jobs or telephone jobs. They don't have to go there. I think there's an opportunity, and I've certainly recommended this to the government, or suggested this to the government, as one of the things we can do to manage our restart is to encourage this kind of thing. For example, if I have a company downtown and I hire somebody in Abbotsford, I should be able to say to that fellow, that person, hey, tell you what, we'll open up an office if you don't feel comfortable working from home, because not everybody does. I'm very happy to do this as a data processing guy, as a programmer. That's my métier. But not everybody likes that. Some people have to have people around them. So someone who they could say to this fellow in Abbotsford, well, listen, we'll get you an office in this local office service company. we'll hook you up on the corporate network and the corporate phone system. So as far as anybody is concerned, you're just down the hall, just like if you were in the high-rise downtown. But you don't have to drive 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours home. So there's and apart from saving in emissions, saving in costs, saving in loss of productive time, there's also the opportunity in those kind of things that these office services companies can become incubators, because they would be putting a whole bunch of different kinds of companies, people working for different companies together. So as they meet at the water cooler and the coffee in the break room, there's opportunities for synergies, for cross-pollination of ideas and business. I think it's a hugely great opportunity. And also there are many things, such as, surprisingly, we heard in the health committee from a fellow who is a intensive care physician. He said, we as intensive care physicians can make use of this also. There are many follow-up visits, so we don't actually have to have in person. We can just we can have a conversation. We heard that from pharmacists as well. And many general practitioners as well will welcome this kind of ability, so they can have personal contact, visual contact, and they can be more productive. They can, and it's easier for patients and so forth. And many of these kinds of circumstances have been trying to achieve these kinds to use these kind of tools for many years, but were blocked by regulatory barriers. Well, with COVID, suddenly these regulatory barriers have kind of gone away. And they say, well, we'll try it out. And now, having tried it out and being able to verify that it's effective, that it's useful, that it works, I think it'll be very hard to put those barriers back up again. So I think there's all kinds of opportunities for climate change, for making the services of many people much more available to more people. I think are huge.
I agree. There are a lot of opportunities are coming out of that come out of a time like now, when we absolutely have to evolve to keep safe. But I'm going to challenge you a little bit, because you kind of didn't answer the question. The question originally was, what do you think? How do you think this should work out, the inequity of the situation? I'm going to take it a little bit farther. I'd also like to point out, because I failed to say, that there's a lot of problems with nurses and people in the health service who are not able to get out of that system, step away and take advantage of all those benefits that technology and Zoom and that kind of thing are affording certain segments of the society. So I'm going to go a little farther with this, because this is something that I really thought about with regards to COVID. Is this particular disease it was brought to us, and I'm not pointing at any ethnicity or anything like that. I am just saying this particular disease moved around the globe through essentially an affluent group of people who were able to move around. And it seems like the more affluent you are, the better you can protect yourself from this particular disease. But what's happening is this disease is affecting the most disadvantaged in our community. And I'm going to ask this first question. Is that just the way it is? Though the most disadvantaged people are affected the most. Well, that's just how it goes. Is that how we should look at that?
I don't think so. And we have to be very careful in our response, that we make sure that people who need help are getting the help. But it's kind of a different question than talking about virtual meetings and so forth, right?
Yeah. I'm kind of trying to stay on the COVID thing.
Well, I think virtual meetings are part of the COVID thing. I think it's
part of the solution.
I think it's part of also making us a more resilient society for this kind of thing.
So is there something in that for the most disadvantaged, the people who have to go to work, who work or who have lost all forms of work because of this. How is that technology helping them?
Well, I don't.
I know.
I don't see that.
I'm surprising you, and I don't mean to.
That's okay.
I don't mean to surprise you.
I don't see that as an inequity. For example, there's some jobs you need steel-toed boots, right? The fact that you have another person who doesn't need steel-toed boots is not an inequity. That's the nature of the job. There are jobs that deal with data. The jobs that deal with you can do the job over the phone. Those kind of jobs lend itself to this tool. It's a tool that fits that requirement. If you have a job, if you're a welder, you're not going to get much use out of Zoom. Because you got to be there. You got to be cutting steel and melting it together. If you're a shipwright, you got to be in there, making the ship float. So I don't think it's an equity issue. I think when I see equity issues is certainly people who are less advantaged. They can't necessarily isolate as well. They can't. They don't necessarily have things like computer equipment. Those are the kind of issues where we have to look for inequities. We have to make sure that people who have the kind of resources they need, regardless of their circumstances, to survive the pandemic, and we certainly are trying to do that.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the new approach to doing business and inequity and things like that a little bit. I'd like to move on, if that's okay, and talk a little bit about Canada-US relations. We have two very different forms of leadership and different approaches to COVID. And I'm wondering, we've talked about opening the border or keeping it closed. The U.S. has maybe pushed a little bit to open the border, and we've resisted a little more to that. Can you tell us a little bit about who the border is actually open to and who it's not open to at this time?
Sure. So basically all of our borders are closed to non-essential travel. Except that if you're a Canadian citizen and you want to come into the country, you can come in, right? Unless you have COVID symptoms. It is just recently, in the last few days, the Minister Mendocino has announced that there will be some broadening of that base to allow people who are in committed long-term relationships to be able to come to Canada to be with their significant others. It's been broadened to allow people who have for compassionate grounds, for people who are going to come to visit their dying parents or siblings and so forth. So those kind of things are they're all within the boundaries of effective quarantine concerns. Those kind of things have been relaxed a little bit. And in terms of essential travel, I mean, airline crews, ship crews, truckers and so forth, they can cross the border because we need to keep trade moving. We need to bring food from California. We need to, we need bits and parts for equipment and so forth. But those are considered essential to carrying on the business. I believe certain students are able to come here if they've had appropriate status at the university and so forth. But for just general travel to go to Spain for a vacation, firstly, we're discouraging that, and secondly, it depends on those other countries as well, what their circumstances are. And the other thing is we've restricted the airports to which international flights can land to just 4 airports, so Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, and Montreal. So all the other places that were previously being able to accept international travelers, they can't anymore. They're all diverted to those places, and in those locations, we've beefed up and also in the land borders as well. We've beefed up the number of public health personnel as well. The other people who can come into the country in a very limited way are people who are in the States who are on their way to Alaska. That was initially abused and kind of disregarded by some of those people. That has been tightened up quite significantly. There's the number of places where they can cross from the U.S. into Canada from the southern 48 are much reduced. They have a specific time by which they have to get to Alaska, or vice versa. They have to report when they get there, and if they can't stop, they can't do touristy things. They have to minimize contact and all that kind of stuff. That's the Alaska loophole that was a problem, but I think it's somewhat closed.
Okay, and we see that there's an election coming up in the U.S. Do you foresee that there would be any change? If there was a change in leadership, would that change our relationship with the U.S. as far as COVID goes and possible border openings and things like that?
Well, I think things like border openings are going to depend on the health situation there as well as here. Not so much as on the administration that's in charge down there. In terms of who might or might not win, I don't want to weigh in on that. But no matter who is there, that certainly the relationship is different depending on who you're talking to. We had a much different relationship with President Obama than we did with President Trump. But we will work as effectively as we can with whomever is in office down there, and we will work with all levels of government to ensure that Canadians are safe and that Canadian interests are looked after.
We don't yet have a COVID-19 vaccine available. Does Canada have a plan once a vaccine is available to distribute that vaccine, or is there any sort of oversight that'll be done by the federal government?
Yes, so I understand there's about 12 vaccine candidates around the world. Some of them are, they work in different ways. There are different treatments beyond vaccines and so forth. We as a government have signed deals with a number of the major pharmaceutical companies that are going to produce these vaccines if and when they are approved, if and when they're found to be effective. And we've signed deals that, to guarantee a certain number of doses for Canadians. We've also signed on to the COVAX initiative, which is an international undertaking to make sure that people in poorer countries can also get the vaccine. So we have donated, or we will be contributing, I think, something like $200 million to that fund, because of course, the virus doesn't respect borders. We need to beat this virus everywhere, or else we've really beaten it nowhere.
And it'll rebound and rebound and rebound.
Right. There was actually a trial that was supposed to be underway in Halifax, but that was involving the Chinese, and they pulled out of that for some reason, and I don't know. But I understand there was an application just this last Friday for another vaccine. Canadian researchers, Canadian epidemiologists, virologists, and so forth are, they are, the best in the world, or certainly among the best in the world. We just had one of our people in Edmonton actually who just shared the Nobel Prize in virology or in medicine. We have very prominent people in those fields who are developing vaccines. They were within days of the virus being identified. They'd mapped the genome. They were starting to manufacture potential vaccines. It's almost becoming an engineering discipline than science. Manufacturing potential candidates and then testing them in various ways, hoping to get to a point at some stage where they can go into appropriate human trials. So there's a lot of good things on the horizon, but there's still a lot we don't know about the virus. We don't know really if you get the if you get it, are you going to be immune? Are you going to be immune forever? Are you going to be immune for 6 months? Or is it like the flu, where you might be immune to this strain, but the strain changes, and then you're not immune to that one. So every year we have to have a different flu vaccine. Once we solve that, once we get to that point, we will know much more about that. There are already, I believe, 3 known strains of this coronavirus out there, and they vary slightly in terms of how infectious they are and how and what their outcome is.
So I think we're going to have to move on. We just wanted to touch base on respectful workplace, something that is, of course, critical in order to make sure that the work of the government gets done. And it's a common theme to all of our interviews. So can you just give us very briefly just how the Government of Canada ensures a respectful workplace for you, so that your voice can be heard and that you can take the voice of your constituents forward?
Okay, it's not the Government of Canada, it would be the Parliament of Canada, okay? But certainly we have resources through the Parliament. We have HR resources actually through the party as well as from the Parliament to help people, if they have any issues, any emotional or anxiety issues, for example. My staff is at their choice. They're able to work either from home or come to the office, both here and in Ottawa. And right now in Ottawa, I have one fellow who's working in the office because his internet is no good at his home, but by and large they're all working from home. And we are supportive of that. The Parliament is providing additional support for people who are working from home to cover some of their additional internet costs. But it's really up to my staff to work where they're comfortable working. So if they, James comes in fairly often because he needs to print stuff, but I think he's comfortable working here. But he's also fully able, at his discretion to work from home.
Right. And then you also, of course, are dealing with constituents on a regular basis. And you have constituents that have a wide range of perspectives and opinions on different things. How do you ensure that all of those constituents are respectfully heard, whether or not you agree with what they're saying?
I very commonly meet with people from all perspectives and hear what they have to say. Sometimes I'll push back and say, I don't agree with anything you're saying, but but to the extent that I can, I bring their issues, their concerns forward to our leadership and to the government ministers where appropriate.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's great. And did you have any other questions, or do you want to?
So along the lines that we're talking about, everybody being heard. Something that's really interesting to me, and I just want your take on what you think is happening, is that even when we've been talking about COVID today, and we have seen 2 completely separate avenues of thought within our community. If you even just walk down the street right now, you'll see people who are wearing their masks 100% of the time. I see people driving in their cars wearing their masks, which, they're taking it really seriously. And then we're seeing people who don't. There are 2 avenues of thought. What my real question is where's that divide coming from, and what is happening in Canada that is separating us from these kinds of divisions and sometimes lack of respect? Because in a COVID situation where it could result in serious health effects to my fellow citizen, there are people who are not respecting my feelings about it. If I'm wearing a mask, they're not respecting my feelings. What has happened in Canada that has made us stop respecting each other? I think that's my question to you. Like, what do you think? I know that there's no answer. But
that's a huge question. I think there are a number of people who are suspicious of science, and I don't understand that, because science is what makes the quality of life that we have good. It protects the environment, all kinds of stuff. Science is how we find out what is true and what is not true, what works and what doesn't. And the science around epidemiology, which is a tough word for me, and is pretty solid. There's certainly and we have people like Dr. Henry, Dr. Tam, who have been in this world for decades, who have been dealing with this stuff on an ongoing basis. I think Dr. Tam sleeps 4 hours a night. We need to listen to these people, but we need to listen to what they actually say, not what people say they said. For example, Dr. Tam, for example, suggested at one point that, well, many people have said, many important people in this field have said, the biggest thing we can do is maintain that 6-foot distance. And if you can't maintain the 6-foot distance, you should be wearing a mask. Avoid crowded spaces, and if you can't avoid crowded spaces, wear the mask. People often translate that to say, oh, I have to always wear a mask. Well, that's not what you're being told, right?
There seems to be a connection with that thought when we're being told by officials who are using the scientific method to determine what the best options are for us and how we can move forward in a way that allows us to open up a bit. There seems to be at the same time some kind of connection where, well, if you tell me to do that, you're taking away my freedoms. There is that science aspect, but there seems to be a narrative in our society that says we're having our freedoms taken away. And what frightens me about that a little bit is it sounds very much like the language of our southern border, or our southern neighbors. It sounds like a language from there. Is that it? Is it because we're exposed to a certain amount of that kind of rhetoric from the United States that it's starting to bleed in, or is there something even more so going on?
The United States sneezes and Canada catches a cold.
Yeah.
I think there's an element of that, but I think it's really important, that we understand that our freedoms come with obligations, and my freedom to do one thing doesn't give me the right to for example, the classic scenario, my right to swing my fist stops at your nose, right? Right? You have a right not to be battered, and so I don't have an unlimited right to swing my fist. It's the same with health issues, and that's how we live together. That's how we get along as a society. Is we have to cooperate.
Respect each other.
Respect each other and respect each other's rights. For example, in this context, rights is kind of probably the wrong word to use. But for me to wear a mask when I'm in close proximity to people who are not within my bubble, it's my obligation to protect them from being infected by me. I know I'm not infectious, but they don't necessarily know that. But all the people who are infecting other people, I don't think anybody knows that they're infectious, right? So we have to assume when we go to meet with new people that we are we might be infectious. Wear the mask. We protect them. They should wear the mask to protect me.
Our rights and freedoms flow both ways.
Exactly right.
Yeah, we have to show.
They handshake. I mean, your right to the swing in the fist example again, right? One right. The rights are not unlimited. They're not absolute. They as soon as they start affecting other people, then they have to be modified appropriately.
Right.
And I think we're running close to our time here. So we just wanted to give you a quick opportunity to tell us, Ron, I know we've focused on COVID through the whole interview, but what makes you jump out of bed in the morning and be excited about being a member of Parliament? Like, what are your issues that you've really kind of taken to heart?
Well, I'm not an early riser, so jumping out of bed in the morning is probably not the exact thing.
What makes you jump out of bed at a little after noon?
Yeah, later in the morning.
Well, I really like what I'm doing. I'd like to be able to help people to find solutions to their problems. I like to be able to propose solutions as they come to me from people, or as I make them up, dream them up myself, to ministers. Things like talking about the potential ramifications of telecommuting and telework to ministers. I think that's a great opportunity. The option to be able to talk about, electoral reform, for example, which I still haven't succeeded at, but we still be able to carry on. I'm still able to carry on those conversations.
You're just sweet talking us.
I am absolutely sweet talking you. My electoral reform isn't your electoral reform, but but that's part of the conversation. I think it's a great opportunity to be involved and to do things that are important to people. My Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act, which happened in the last Parliament, is an example of that. I mean, a year and a half ago, I think it was, I had a lady sit in my office and say that her son was alive today because of that bill. That's pretty powerful, right? These are the things that I mean, there's nothing I'd rather be doing at this time in my life, frankly. I mean, I'm a computer programmer. That'll never leave my DNA. But having said that, I'm very content doing these kinds of things, and my staff has to keep me out of mucking about with the website.
Leave it up. That's awesome. I think so. I think that we have exhausted all of the things that we'd hoped. Well, there's not a chance that we've exhausted. We could have this conversation go on for a couple of hours, and I've really enjoyed having a chance to talk to you like this. At this point, though, we need to wrap up. So what I'd like to say at the end is thank you, Ron, for coming on to our little internet program, We've Got Issues. And I'd like to take a moment to also thank Tri-City Community TVs for having us, or helping us film this and get this out into our community. Because I think what We've Got Issues is trying to do is have conversations with the people who are making the decisions, and or on our behalf having the conversations with other people who are making the decisions. So thanks to Tri-City Community TV for doing that for us. They need our support, and hopefully we can bend Ron's arm and get him to speak up for Tri-City Community TV whenever he gets a chance. Again, thank you for watching our little program, and hopefully we're finding this informative when we have these little conversations. So thank you, and good afternoon.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and I want to thank Tri-Cities Community Television as well. And I'm sorry that we have to cut it a little short. I just want to say, and just going back to the whole Zoom thing, is I have to go back now and vote. There's a vote on the budget. Sorry, not the budget, the throne speech. So this is a confidence vote, which I'm going to be able to do from my home, which I think is quite elegant, frankly. Yeah. And I think it's a harbinger of the future. And but anyway, thank you all for giving me this opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. That was great.
Thank you, everyone.